So why did I buy a ranch in New Mexico in 1993? So they were starting to understand in the 90s that our world of the physics world, there was things that were just unexplainable.
And you wanted to investigate.
Can these areas of strange things be described by some form of mathematics?
Jeffrey Epstein bought a massive ranch in the New Mexico desert in 1993. His explanation was unusual. He said it was for science. But years later, that explanation became just one part of a much darker story. Allegations of abuse of the property, combined with years of unanswered questions, have fueled intense speculation online about what Epstein was actually doing at Zorro Ranch, including yet-to-be-verified theories that extend to human cloning and genetics. But decades later, Zorro Ranch became something else entirely, a potential key to the Epstein mystery, a place many believed could finally answer the questions that had remained unresolved for years. But just as Zorro Ranch appeared to be the breakthrough investigators have been waiting for, something happened that threatened to stop the search for answers altogether. A development that has brought the biggest questions surrounding Zorro Ranch back into focus. Was this property overlooked by accident, or is the full story still being kept out of reach? To understand why Zorro Ranch has become such a focus, you have to understand what made this property different from the others connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein owned multiple properties: a townhouse in Manhattan, a mansion in Palm Beach, a private island in the Caribbean. But Zorro Ranch was different. It was remote, massive, and far away from the places where most of the public attention had focused after Epstein's arrest. The property covered thousands of acres outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a large private residence, multiple structures, and a level of isolation that made it unlike any of Epstein's other locations. And for years, that isolation became one of the biggest questions surrounding it. Because after Epstein's crimes became public, investigators focused heavily on many parts of his network. But Zorro Ranch remained a place where many questions appeared to remain unanswered. When Epstein was arrested in 2019, the world expected investigators to examine every part of his operation: his properties, his finances, his relationships, his associates. But after Epstein died before facing trial, many of those questions remained unresolved. And one question continued to come up: what happened at Zorro Ranch? According to reporting on fresh allegations, young women and men were lured to Zorro Ranch, where they alleged they were abused and exploited by Epstein in the worst way possible. Those accounts transformed the ranch from a secluded desert estate into one of the most significant and least understood locations in the Epstein world. That's what made the renewed investigation so significant. For people who had followed the Epstein case for years, Zorro Ranch represented something they believed was still missing: a chance to finally examine the property that had remained in the shadows. That pressure intensified after newly surfaced questions about how the investigation into the ranch had been handled. And in February 2026, that opportunity finally arrived. New Mexico Attorney General Raúl Torrez reopened the state investigation into Epstein's activities at Zorro Ranch. The move came alongside a broader effort by the New Mexico lawmakers to investigate what happened at the property, including the creation of a bipartisan truth commission with subpoena power. For the first time in years, Zorro Ranch was no longer just a source of unanswered questions, it was the focus of an active investigation. It looked like Zorro Ranch might finally become the breakthrough people had been waiting for. But what happened next would raise a completely different question: not what investigators found at the ranch, but whether they had access to everything they needed to find out. Because before the latest dispute with the Department of Justice, there was another moment that raised questions about whether Zorro Ranch had ever received the scrutiny it deserved. When Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2019, investigators moved quickly. His Manhattan townhouse was searched, his properties became the focus of intense scrutiny, and the public expected every major piece of Epstein's operation to be examined. But according to critics, one property remained a major unanswered question: Zorro Ranch. As the federal investigation unfolded, questions emerged in New Mexico about whether the property had received the level of scrutiny many expected. Two tips stand out. The first, an anonymous email in 2019 from a former ranch staff member was sent to a radio host claiming perished victims were buried around Zorro.
That I've already texted the FBI. I've already given them the name. I've told them where to go and why and what to do it. I did that on February 22nd, documented in a text. If they want to investigate that lead, they can.
Another person raising concerns was a retired New Mexican law enforcement officer who pointed to the potential areas of interest on the ranch, including a barn with a garage door that appears to be a sally port, and there's a chimney, speculating that an incinerator might be hidden inside the barn. Both tips were sent to the FBI and prompted no search and no follow-up. Those claims added to a growing question. What had investigators actually examined at Zorro Ranch, and what might have been missed? But before those questions could be fully explored, the investigation changed course. Epstein was facing federal charges in New York. Then in August 2019, he died in federal custody, leaving behind a case filled with unanswered questions. In the years that followed, new documents emerged, civil lawsuits continued, investigations into Epstein's associates moved forward, but Zorro Ranch remained one of the biggest unresolved pieces of the story. With the formal investigation launched in 2026, the newly established effort between the New Mexico Attorney General's office and the Bipartisan Truth Commission represented the moment many had been waiting for. New evidence would finally be examined, new leads could be pursued, and long-standing questions about Zorro Ranch could finally be addressed. But before investigators could uncover what happened at Zorro Ranch, they needed access to the information that already existed. Because according to New Mexico's Attorney General, the problem wasn't that investigators weren't looking, the problem was that they say they were missing a critical piece of the puzzle. That obstacle became public this week. New Mexico Attorney General Raúl Torrez accused the Department of Justice of failing to provide critical records connected to the Zorro Ranch investigation. The issue? According to Torrez, his office has repeatedly requested original, unredacted versions of federal records, documents that could contain names, witness information, and other details investigators say they need to follow leads. But according to the Attorney General, those records have not been turned over. In a letter made public this week, Torrez wrote that every redacted name, blocked out image, or hidden date could represent a lead that investigators are unable to pursue. And that is what has reignited frustration among people who have followed the Epstein case for years, because to them, Zorro Ranch was supposed to be the place where unanswered questions finally started getting answers. The Department of Justice, however, disputes the idea that it is refusing to cooperate. The U.S. Attorney's Office District of New Mexico said, earlier today, Attorney General Blanche reaffirmed the Department of Justice's commitment to working with the New Mexico DOJ, and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York stated that his office is seeking dialogue with the New Mexico DOJ to reach an accommodation that is consistent with the protective orders that are in place. So the question becomes, if both sides say they want the investigation to continue, why are investigators still fighting over access to the evidence? And the timing makes this dispute even more significant. The person receiving the letter is Todd Blanche, the acting Attorney General and Donald Trump's former personal attorney, who is now facing confirmation proceedings to lead the Department of Justice. For critics, the timing raises concerns about whether the Justice Department is being transparent enough in a case that has already generated years of public distrust. For the DOJ, the issue is about handling sensitive investigative material appropriately. But regardless of where someone stands, the central question remains the same. After years of waiting for answers about Zorro Ranch, will investigators finally get access to the information they say they need? And while New Mexico continues pressing the Department of Justice for access to those records, Congress has already moved on to the next battle. Today, a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced what's being called the Epstein Files Transparency Act 2.
Today, Thomas Massey and I are introducing the Epstein Files Transparency Act 2.0 to give state attorney generals and the survivors of sexual abuse the ability to sue the Department of Justice and force the release of the remaining Epstein files. Now, survivors will be able to sue, and states' attorney generals will be able to sue to finally release these documents so that we can have justice.
Supporters say the original transparency law exposed millions of pages of records, but they argue it left one major loophole. If the Justice Department refuses or delays turning over records, there are few effective ways to force compliance. Which brings the story full circle. The fight over Zorro Ranch is no longer just about one property in New Mexico. It's now about who gets access to the evidence and who gets to decide when the public sees it. Whether this new legislation passes, whether New Mexico ultimately gets the records it says it needs, and whether those records answer any of the questions surrounding Zorro Ranch is something we'll find out soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help me bring you even more deep dives into political and cultural mysteries. If you want more like this, please watch a suggested video that pops up on screen now.